Hi everybody, welcome to the Performance Health webinar for September. This is going to be a really free-flow webinar today, and lots of practical with my very lovely, trusty, same hand again, Rachel sitting by my side. Those of you who are with us live, you'll get the certificate sent to you by email afterwards. And please do, if you think of questions as you're going through, by all means, please pop them into the chat and we'll check them at the end. So I lovingly called this session On the Upside, because I don't know about you, but my instinct when I'm splinting is to splint on the volar surface of the hand. It seems more natural, it's more instinctive to me. But there actually are situations where you might want to or need to splint on the dorsal surface, which of course brings a whole wealth of different issues that we have to manage. Many more bony prominences, and the skin is a different texture. There's much more friction going through, particularly if you have a splint on the dorsal surface of the hand. So you have to sort of think in a slightly different way. So I think what I do today is run through a variety of different splints on the dorsal surface of the hand, and then we can just talk about why and when and how it might work. The other thing that I've got here is a whole wealth of different paddings and linings, and again, I think it's a good opportunity to talk about those. Now, I'll also bring in my own experience, because since the last webinar, I've actually had surgery on my own hand. So I've actually been wearing splints. I had to wear one full time, 24 hours a day for a month. And now I'm wearing one at night. And even 30, 35 years in from making splints, I've learned a lot again about wearing a splint myself. I've done it before, but I think it's a really, really good experience. Every single one of us should make a splint and wear it for ourselves, because it's then that we really understand what makes the difference between adequate and good. But let's start with the most obvious dorsal splint, and that's going to be a splint for mallet finger. Now, we know that most people go off to A&E and they'll be put in the little stack splints. We know they get sweaty, they don't fit very well. If there's a lot of swelling and it fits with the swelling on, then they get loose afterwards. So ideally, we're going to replace it. Now, I am going to show you with pattern making, but this is one of those that you really probably don't need to pattern make. You could even just measure the length of the finger to the PIP and then just draw it straight onto the scrap of the material. But if you wanted to pattern make, let's show you how. So we'll just switch to the overhead camera. And I'm going to imagine that I'm working on the index finger. Now you'll see that actually this index finger is just tending a little bit to a swan neck deformity. So we'll do two different types here. I'm going to draw around the finger twice, in fact, and here is the PIP joint and DIP joint that I need. And then I'm going to draw around it again, because we're going to make two different splits. I'm going to mark the same component. Thank you. I'll just swap colour so that you can see really well. Terribly well. There we go. Is that better? Hopefully you can see better now. So if I'm just making a normal mallet finger splint, I just want to dip this away from where the PIP is and not come too far around the sides of the fingers, because we're going to be using a tape that is rigid. So zinc oxide tape or Leukoplast tape is absolutely necessary for this sort of splint. So we're really going to have something very simple like this. However, you do get those occasional patients, don't you, where the swan neck starts to come in. So we actually need to include the base of the finger. So I'm actually going to make a second one. And just cut these both out. Loosely to start with. Okay. And then we'll just match them both onto the hand in a second. There's the one. second one. So we'll start with the really simple one. This is such a good way of using up the scraps. So really, pretty much any material is going to be fine with a sling, to be honest. But you don't want something too thick. So something that is a 1.6 thickness if you can. So let's just have Rachel's finger here. So we're going to literally, you can see it scoops away just where the PIP is, just to be a little bit kind on those bony edges. And you want to come exactly to the end of the finger. Now, you don't want it to go longer than the finger, partly because you're going to catch it then on things, but secondly, because of the way that we're going to tape it on. And because this splint has to be on 24/7, taping is by far the easiest. So this is a really simple, and we can see it's going to fit fine. But if we've got a mallet and we're just beginning to develop that swan neck with it, so particularly the late presenting ones in people who are a little bit hypermobile, then what we want to do is we want to hold the DIP in extension, but we also need to hold the PIP in flexion at the same time. So we've got the same dorsal splint here distally, but we want to have the splint proximally holding the PIP in a bit of flexion with the DIP there in extension. So this is all to do with how you handle it. And because we've got this contour, my material of choice for this would be something a bit more moldable. Again, I would probably go for complex 2, something like that. Okay, so let's show you on the materials. So let's make the little one out of some aquaplast watercolors. And I'm just going to mark onto the splint with my marker. Of course, I've got purple on purple. That's good. So I'm just going to vaguely dot around it. I know pretty much what shape it is, but I actually want my other one to be on polyplex, which is going to be much more moldable. It's a white material. So you'll be able to see if I move up here, you can see it in the overhead camera. In fact, if I put that there, you can see that even better. And I'm just going to dot around. Okay, and then I will cut the two. So I've got my splint pan behind me. So let's open that up, pop that in. And while that one's doing it, there's enough depth here for me to just dip in the polyflex. And because my hands get a little more and more arthritic, I try to never ever cut materials when they are completely cold. So, there we go. This one can go in now. Right, here is my aquaplast. Now, with aquaplast, remember, it's a memory material. So because it's a memory material, you've only really got one chance at cutting to keep the really nice edges. So if you possibly can cut and place onto the patient at the same time without having to re-dip, then you'll keep the nice sealed edges. If you can't, and you need to put the splinting material back in, just be aware that the edges will open out. And having worn a splint, even the littlest little edge makes a difference. So I'm going to just cut this to shape and size. Nice long sweeps as we've done before, so you try and minimize the amount of little catches where you change the figures. And we have splints sitting in position. And I'm just going to support that DIP up into extension as you would if there was a mallet injury. super simple little splint. Want that to just cool off. Now, what I always do is take these on, certainly for the healing period, so 6 weeks if it's a bony one, and 8 weeks if it's an avulsion fracture, if it's a tendinous one. And then I'll use zinc oxide tape to hold it. Then what I do is I tend to put a piece of Velcro over the top, and then we just strap it on for those extra few weeks when people want to wear it at night time when they're out and about in big crowds, etc. So that's easily adapted afterwards, but we'll just go super simple. So you can see here how easy that is. And because I did it in one go, it's fairly smooth, hopefully smooth enough. Okay, so I've already cut some pieces of tape. Now this tape comes in a couple of colours. What I tend to do, so I'm using white here so you can see it, but I'll show you. It comes in white and it comes in beige. I tend to do one around the distal phalanx. Remember, don't put any force through it. I then tend to do one around the middle phalanx. Always make sure that it's long enough that they just slightly overlap. And then I do a third piece that comes from underneath the finger and lifts the DIP up into the splint. And then I put another layer. So this is the other colour that it comes in. It's the beige. You're going multicolored here. It's a shame it's not pink and purple. And then one there, just to hold it in place. And there we go. There we got a mallet finger splint. The reason I really like these ones is because now, if you're touching the surface, you've still got your sensory part of the finger. I know you've got tape on it, but at least you've got your sensory part of the finger free. So now, having taped you in there, we have to figure out how to get you out. So hence my little diddy scissors, and I always will go just very gently at the very sides of the splint. And you can, if you can see that, I haven't got the glasses on it. Yeah. Now, obviously, if this person has a mallet, I will do this with them sitting flat on the table, because what we can't do is afford for that finger to bend at the tip. So it'll be, I'll just cut along the sides with it sitting down. I'll open it out. I'll then hold the tip, take it off, place them back flat so that it's completely safe, and then clean it and do whatever I need to do with it. Okay, so there we go. So there's that splint. So we'll keep that one to one side somewhere. And then what do we do if you've got this swan neck? Now, let's get the other bit of splint material out of the splint pan. So here's our bit of polyflex, which is going to be much more moldable. Now I'm always going to cut inside. So I've measured around the hand, I've checked it fits, and then I've drawn just on the outside of the pattern onto the material, which means I can cut just on the inside. There are no pen marks. Pen marks, allergic to pen marks. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is have the PIP in slight flexion and the DIP again into extension. Just relax your finger. Thank you, and I'm not fighting you. There we go. Now, because we've used a much more moldable material, what you'll find is you can do this and it can mold with those angles without dog-earing at the side. And again, what I would generally do is I will put tape on this distal end, but then I'll actually have a Velcro strap around this end, so that can come off and we can bend and straighten the PIP, but it blocks it from going into full extension. And that should help manage the slim neck. But I won't put the straps on there, but you can basically see what we're up to. So there we go. Splint number 2 on the outside. Okay. So, third option is if you've got a PIP contracture. Again, my instinct would be to make a little volar splint sitting underneath the finger with a very gentle, with careful strap over the PIP or just onto the proximal phalanx to try and get that low prolonged stretch. But there are occasions when people find it really, it's more sweaty, there might be wounds under here or a really hypersensitive scar. You shouldn't, if there's still a wound, it's too early to be doing it anyway. So scar. So you might think, well, I could get a really good lever if I go over the top of that finger. So let's give that a go. So again, Rachel, I'm going to borrow your hand. Let's go on the middle finger for this one. So all I need here, again, is the dorsal aspect of the finger. I'm going to mark PIP and DIP. Thank you. Okay. Now, this really is a lesson in physics, because the longer the lever arm, the less force and the more we're spreading the forces. So I don't want to make it too short, and I would say it's always worth bringing it down onto the distal phalanx, so you've got a little bit more space and a bit more an angle. But what's really important is that we don't end up pulling the DIP into extension or hyperextension rather than the PIP. If you're aiming for it to be a PIP, it needs to be a PIP. So here we have your hand again. Lovely. So it sits over the dorsum here. Now imagine this is a PIP joint which is contracted down. So what we're wanting is to have almost like a, what you call that? Almost like a tongue sticking forwards on the front there. And we're aiming to gently bring the finger back with straps. So let's make this one, and then let's look at how we would strap it to be bringing the finger back up to this position. So again, you could make this out of anything that's vaguely moldable. We'll go again onto the nice purple. So Aquaplast, of course, comes in all these really lovely colours. Oh, it doesn't quite fit on there. So, yeah. So what you're wanting is, again, good adherence from your patient. You want people to wear it. So they're only going to wear it if they really like it. So when I was wearing mine on my DIP, what did I do? I decided that I was going to make them in a whole variety of different colours. I had a pink one, I had a red one, and I had a blue one. And then I used different colour cobands over the top of them. And it was a fashion statement every day, depending on what I was wearing. Why not? Okay, just leave that in there. Again, if you can, because it's Aquaplast, because it's got a memory, if you could cut and fit all in one go, then that's going to be better. Now, if the PIP joint itself looks a little bit unhappy or uncomfortable, or it's a little bit, you're worried about the rubbing, this is one of those splints that you could line, because where the PIP is, no matter how good your straps are, on the whole, you're going to be taking the force against this joint. If you're going to line your splint, it needs to be lined before you fit it. Because if you line it after you've fitted it, because it's so small and so tight, it's not going to work. The other thing that I've discovered is actually little finger splints are so much more comfortable if we put a little bit of lining. Now, I've never used this lining before, so I'm going to cut you a bit. They call it the tubular elastic bandage, and it's 5/8 of an inch. So I've been using this with my little splints, and it has made a massive difference. So you just pop that over. And that might be enough without any padding, but it does stop the sweating, and it really is so much more comfortable, which again, I don't think until I had to wear a splint for a month, I truly appreciated for myself. Always worth being a patient. Although my poor hand surgeon said that she had never had so much feedback from a patient as she had from me. I think she was slightly regretting having accepted me as a patient, bless her. So here we go. We're going to cut this splint. Oh, I need to sharpen the scissors. Okay. So remember this PRP joint is sitting in flexion. So the sitting in flexion here, and I want this lozenge or the tongue bit to be just sitting above where the finger is, so that I've got an angle to bring it up to. So I'm going along the proximal phalanx and then leaving this to bring the finger up towards. Now, if I do this again with some padding in it so you can see the difference. So I would want to pad this area in here, potentially this area here. So we've got a few choices. So you've got something very, very thin, like this fleecy web. Whether that's actually going to give a difference in comfort, I don't know. You could use something a little bit thicker, like this Hackler, but that is actually quite thick. Which I think in a small splint like that would be a bit uncomfortable. You could use this contour foam. Now, I'm going to use the blue quite often, but the pink seems a really good idea for this one because it's going to move, it's going to squish absolutely according to the shape here, which means that you really will get an equal pressure. So I'm going to add a little bit of contour foam. This is a thinner density than the blue one, to that part of the splint. But then what I'm going to have to do is remold it, because now this is not going to, you see, that just doesn't fit as well. So if you decide that you want to put some padding in, you need to actually mold it with the padding in. Obviously, the padding is going to hold the water. So when you take it out, just squish it down on the towel so that you take the water out of the padding. Now I can now do that again with the padding in, and it will be more comfortable and it will fit better. So just make that choice. Remember, this is a bent finger. Sorry. Unfortunately, I know you don't have a bent finger, so we're just having to pretend we have a bent finger, but we've all seen enough PIP joint contractures to not have to use much of an imagination with that one. Now, depending on how much of an angle you're going to be pulling on, you may need these edges to be a little bit narrower. So I'm just going to put some, while it's still warm, just going to put a little bit of Velcro. To hold on the proximal phalanx. Okay. You all right? Mm-hmm. Now. Let me show you what I mean about having this a little bit narrower, so you get better access for the straps. base of figure. Now that has to be really stable, because if it isn't, you're never going to get that angle to pull you up. But I'm not going to get that angle to pull up until this has actually gone off, and the room's quite warm. So it's not going to happen super quickly. So I might just let that go off while we start the next splint, and we'll come back to it. You won't forget it, it's going to sit there. Super. Okay, so let's start getting a little bit bigger with splints now. So if I can draw around your hand again, I'm thinking here about something like a Dupuytren splint, where you might have, we'll pop that off. Oh, we'll leave it on. Where you might have wounds on the little and ring fingers, like Z-plasties coming up between proximal phalanx and down to the distal palmar crease, and you might want to leave those open to the air. It's good for healing, not to have the pressure on it. Let the air get to it. It's easier for circulation and the air and comfort. So you may want to do this splint part dorsally. So again, I'm just drawing around the hand, just getting my landmarks, wrist, MCP, PIP, DIP of these two fingers, and I just want to mark where that first web space is. Lovely, thank you. So I'm going to draw a splint. Essentially, it's going to, from the PIPs, which are here, distally, it's going to be on the volar surface, but the rest of it is going to be dorsal. So I'm going to scoop behind the metacarpal heads here, because that would be uncomfortable. Come into that first web space, a little bit around the ulnar dorsally, because that will give you really nice contour and give you stability of the splint. Now, this would be the splint as you would expect, but where I'm going to cut through here, we really need a bit of extra material to give it a bit of strength. So I'm just going to open out wide, just around where I'm going to be cutting through it, which will give me an opportunity. You'll see I'm going to just do a little fold with it, so you'll be able to see why that will be helpful. So I'm going to cut that out now. A little extra lumps. Now don't forget, if you are making a splint to hold the fingers in extension, so not a posi, but a fingers in extension, when we open out our hands, it is natural for the fingers to be slightly abducted. So don't make it with the fingers really pushed, abducted together. That will be really uncomfortable for your patient. So you really want to make sure that you have recognized that when we're flexed, our fingers are together. When we are extended, they're open. So don't push them together when they're open. Okay, so I've got my little line here where I'm going to be cutting through. So I want to just practice this on. I want to test and see whether it fits. So I'm just going to cut on the paper where I would fit. Now, paper doesn't stretch like material does or contour. So just put a few little snips in, and now the paper will behave like splinting material. Okay, so here we go. We're going to be volar from the PIPs distally, and we're going to be dorsal for the rest of the splint, which is going to leave all of that front of the hand empty as we wanted. Okay. And now you can see I've got this extra bit of material both sides to fold and flat to give that integrity and that strength to the splint. Again, I've got enough material, you can see, Rach, can I tip you that way a little bit? So I've got enough material to leave a gap between these fingers, but still have a little bit of an edge either side. So again, we're giving stability, but it's not going to be rounded, it's flat with two edges. Okay, let me show you what I mean. Now again, this is a small splint with quite a lot of contour. My material of choice, again, is going to be polyflex. If you're less comfortable and confident, then get a slightly thicker polyflex because it'll give you a little bit more integrity and a little bit more working time, which would be really helpful. So I'm going to again just most economical way of putting this onto this piece of material. Here we go. So there we go. So I'm just going to dot around where I want to be. Now I know the basic shape. I don't need to draw a thick line. I know what I'm doing with as little as that. In fact, probably a little bit less. And again, this then goes into the split pad. Now I'm just going to do a very basic, again, this is my hands. Protect, please, all protect your thumbs. Don't cut these materials unless they're a little bit hot. So just a very rough cut. And then in it goes. Okay. So while that's just cooking, you can use exactly the same principle, but doing the whole hand. I had a surgeon that I used to work with a long time ago who absolutely loved these splints for all of his Dupuytren patients. He liked them to go up to forearm because he really wanted the whole of the palm to get a really nice elongation, rather than when you make it on the hand, you really do get a good distal elongation, but it sort of gets lost mid-palm. So if you want the whole elongation, you do need to include the wrist a little bit. And so I used to really like these. Again, because it's a dorsal splint, you have to be careful, particularly in people who've got very bony arm styloids, because that can, in this situation, so again, if it was a rub on here, that would be really uncomfortable. So let's, sorry, we're just slightly off the end of the splint, off the towel, I should say. Okay, draw around the whole of the hand this time. And again, mark where my MCP, that's where I'm going to do my slot through this time. Need to know where this is. Lovely, thank you. So this is all dorsal. This is all dorsal. This bit here, all going to be dorsal. And then I'm going to do my slot through. So again, I'm just going to build myself that extra bit of material to give that integrity, to give that rollover. And then again, the hand is going to be with the fingers abducted. So I need enough edge to be able to get a little bit of a lip and the right lens. A little bit of this really gives that integrity. I'll also show you how to add a thumb piece to this one. I think we've got enough time for that. So while I was just thinking about this webinar, I was thinking, and of course, with my experience of my recent experience of wearing thermoplastic splints, that's certainly the one I've had to wear for the longest, the most persistent wear ever over the last 30 years. It really started me thinking about what are the things that help our patients wear splints better. And a big shout out, Emma, if you're on the webinar from Derby, your paper on adherence that you wrote this year is absolutely fantastic. And I think everybody should read that. It's really pulling together of the knowledge we have around what makes the difference to patients, whether they adhere to their splinting regimes or not. Now, of course, the first concept there that's really difficult is, what is adherence? I mean, what does it mean? Well, to me, it really means somebody who wears the splint following the instructions that I've given. But this paper looks through what are the reasons that have been identified in other papers that prevent people from wearing their splints. And by far the biggest featured mentioned aspect was difficulties with activities of daily living. It just gets in the way. Now, of course, Sometimes we actually need those splints to get in the way. For example, a decurvant splint. You may actually be wanting it to be slightly annoying and stopping people from doing everything that they want to do. But very often we're making splints for people to be able to carry on what they're doing, even carrying on with sleeping if it's a nighttime splint, such as this would be. So it's very, very important that we acknowledge some of those reasons why people don't wear their splints. I'll come back to that in a minute, but here we go. You can see how this fits. Volar from the MCPs distally and dorsal proximally to that. Okay, so I'll cut this out. Now, this is a big, strong splint. What's going to be my material of choice? Easy form. Just about, that'll do, perfect. Now you do know that easy form now comes in black, which patients love. For some reason or another, it is not obvious in the catalogue that it comes in black, but they call it charcoal. It's not charcoal, it's black. Other than it's a pain when you come to try to, mark on the material, but for other reasons, for the look of them, it's lovely. So go charcoal. I think they only do it in the really thick one, as is this, but it's worth it. Patients love it. So here I've got my pattern, and I can see where I've scooped out here and here is where I've got that extra width to give me the strength of the material. Okay, now while this is in here, I can now get the small one out. Let's cut that one. So this is the finger-based dorsal splint. One of the reasons I loved polyflex, just cuts like remember, always cut on the inside. Now you can see it is a material that will stretch if you leave it, if you've got a big piece. You can see how I'm naturally supporting the material in my hand as I move it around, so that it's not going to use its own weight to elongate. But the edges always, as long as you cut at the right temperature, the edges are really, really smooth. Okay, so there's the basic splint, and you can see here where I've got those little edges for me to be able to cut across. Now, what I would suggest you do, which camera are we on? Over, should we go overhead? What I would suggest you do, underneath here, you can see white on blue, is work out the length that you're going to cut and go through in the middle. So just cut through in the middle and then cut one way and then cut the other way. And then you can just you really don't want to take out much material. Just cut away the nasty edges where you pushed through. And now you've got smooth. So you've just cut out a little ellipse there. Okay, I'm just going to pop that back into the splint pan, because that's, you can feel that, you can see that's gone quite rigid in there. And we'll do swapsies again. This one, you can take this one out. Okay. Right, so this is easy form, so I don't really need to hold the whole length. It's not going to extend, it's not going to grow in front of your eyes. If this was polyform or polyflex, then it would. But easy form, honestly, listen, I can hold it right from the top here, and I'm not going to lose anything in terms of its length or integrity. It is such a well-behaved material. And I can see just on the inside of my dots, because I drew them on just on the outside of my pattern. So I can trust that it's going to fit. Okay, and again, I'm going to do exactly the same here, where I'm going to look at where that cut is going to be through here. And I'm going to go through in the middle and cut towards one side, and then cut towards the other side. And then you can see you've just got these bits here that are not so nice. And just scoop around to make a very narrow ellipse. I don't like I'm speaking to you. Okay. And there's that splint. Right, let's swap over again. Now, let's just make sure that you can all see. We're in the camera head, I think, the big camera. Yeah. So just very gently slide. Be careful not to pull too much, because this really will open out. And you'll see that that's the right width for the fingers. And now you can see where those little round extra edges that I put in. Make sure that those fingers are slightly apart. You're not pushing them together. So we're flat with a little edge. And actually, you can see I've done pretty much nothing to this. It's done it itself. That's the joy of these really moldable materials. It just does it itself. Less is more in terms of handling. So here we have the finger. Now, you see I'm just putting a little bit of an opening there just to help getting it on. Now, depending on where you're at in the rehab, if you've still got a wound, then you only want to place the hand at its comfortable extension. Once the wound is healed and you've got a scar, you might want to be holding at just a very, very small amount of extension if we've got tight scarring up tissues on the front. But here you can see perfectly how this has left the whole of that surface. Actually, you can see, take that off, you can see it a bit better. It leaves the whole of this surface free. So I would put one strap. Now I've done black. I wouldn't normally do black on white, unless it's a fashion statement that somebody specifically asks for, but just so that people can, so that you can see. Now, what I like to do with my strap that's going to go around the wrist is I will put one end on. Take this around, see where it sits comfortably for her, and then put the second half on. Then it's always in the right place. And now that's comfy. A couple of other little tricks. This is obviously going through the web space. So what I can do is a little bit of if you're using proper Velcro, it won't fray. So that now feels completely different. Now we're talking about adherence. Those little things will make such a big difference to the person that's wearing the splint. Crazy, but true. You could immediately feel the difference in that. So then we're talking about splinting and strapping the fingers. Now fingers need to be strapped in an oblique fashion. So on the front, you want to have two pieces. It's going to make this a little bit smaller. So again, get your strap, have a look, see where it sits. So one is going to be here at this angle, and the second is going to come down here at this angle. And then it's going to fit and sit really nice because you want it to sit completely flat over the fingers. But you also want those to be held really well. And that's where another one of these paddings come in. And that's where the blue contour foam really comes in. And if you put that on the inside of the scrap, what a difference does that make? Massive difference. So it's very economical because you use this so sparingly. So there you've got a completely palm-free finger extension splint. Okay, feel all right? Okay, right, let's get that one off. Let's go back to the other one that I've left in the splint pan. Now, this one that I'm putting on this time covers the whole of the arm. Now, again, what we want to do is really go for adherence. So if someone doesn't like the feeling of plastic or they're sweaty at night time, like a middle-aged menopausal woman, we're going to be sweaty at night time. It's not going to be that nice. And so why not put something between the patient and the splint? Now, these are really nifty, maybe not for this splint, but these are super nice. So to put underneath, these are designed to go underneath splints. So those Dupuytren splints, the OA splints, those sorts of things, that's quite nice. Yeah. They're quite thick though. It's quite nice to have them in a slightly thinner material, but it's nice to have them. And then you've got stockinettes in a whole wealth of different thicknesses. So 5 centimeters, 3.5. This one's really nice. They do it in black, which again, a lot of people really like. So let's put some of this along your forearm. I'm going to cut a hole for the thumb. And again, if we're going to do this, we need to do it before we mold the split. Otherwise, it's not going to fit. So pop that through there. We should. Oh, there should be a hole for your thumb in the right place. Okay. There we go, like that. Okay. Nice. One of the other papers that looked at adherence with splinting identified all sorts of that there were really interesting findings. The clarity of the instructions, very important. So if somebody really understood why they were wearing their splints, their adherence went up. If they felt empathy from the therapist, that actually also went up. So if they believed that the therapist had their best interests at heart, that also went up. I thought that was very interesting. Obviously, mental health problems, depression, anxiety, that negatively affected the splint wear. But I just think some of those things are super interesting, and they're things that we as therapists are in control of. So we really can make a difference. Now, again, you see, this is one of those slot-through splints, and you want to have the ability to attach it to itself. Sorry, she's at a really awkward angle. I would never do that with a patient, but just so that you can see. Now, here we've got our ulnar styloid. Now, you don't have a really bony one, but what I can do is just do a little bit of a push, so I get a little bump, or I can cut a little bit of contour foam, put it over the joint, and then just take it off afterwards. Okay, so we're going to again hold the splint, hold the fingers in extension with a little sidebar, and that's what gives us the stability. But again, because this is holding the fingers straight, then make sure that there's space in between. So here we are, this one's nice. Now, if I was adding a thumb piece, what would I do? I tend to do them separately. I really just take a long piece of splinter material, and it will run from inside the thumb, and I stick it onto here. in the right angle. And I find making this first really helps. And again, here we go with a completely open palm. How would I strap it? Well, again, super simple. One at the wrist, one at the proximal end. There's one. There's two. And then again, if I wanted to have one, which quite often with the Dupuytren, for example, you would want to, this again needs to be diagonal. So at the on the front side, you can see here that they would be diagonal. Okay. Perfect. So just before I carry on and show you how I would strap that little finger splint, can I just check, do we have questions?
Yes, we have 13.
We have some questions. Okay, so I need to make sure I need time to answer some of your questions. But I do think there are two things that I want to just cover. Where's that finger splint? This one? Oh, you've got it. Brilliant. Perfect. So the first one is going back to this. Let me just pop you out of that. Going back to this, it was a middle finger. So let's just get this sitting back on the thing. Comfy. Mm-hmm. Now I can do that quite tight because I've got that contour flowing in the side. It still feels really comfy, doesn't it? It's not too difficult. So now I've got something to push up against. So what I don't want to do is push the DIP up. So you would think you've got the longest lever on pushing here, but of course all that happens is you'll pull someone into a Butonian. So you either need to hold with the Velcro on the middle phalanx, or get a wider, particularly for a really, really solid fixed flexion deformity, I would go wider strap and go right across the whole of this and pull them together. So if you imagine this is twice the width there, and pull them up together towards, and then you've got that longer lever. And that's basically how I would do it. So that was the first thing. And the second thing I was just going to mention is this can also give you the pattern that you would do if you wanted to do a dorsal wrist brace. So just with the fingers completely free, you would do the identical splint to this, but rather than all of this area here for the fingers, I'll show you with a pattern. You would just, instead of this bit, if I have it here, so this bit on the back is exactly the same, but this bit at the front, instead of having the bit that comes up, you have just a piece that you're going to flip over this way, and it will sit just underneath the proximal palmar crease, and you'll get the same little connection on the outside. So now you've got a dorsal splint of somebody that's on a typing all the time, or needs to rest the pad of their palm onto the surface to work. They're going to find this so much more comfortable than either a fully circumferential or a volar wrist brace. But it's exactly the same, essentially. Right, Rachel's just going to hop over and have a look at some of the questions. I'm just going to get all the different splints and paddings and things sitting in an easy place. That one.
So one of the questions is, can you just remind us what was the foams, the different foams?
Okay, good point. So these are contour foam. So it comes in the pink and the blue. They come in a pack of 2 pieces, sort of this size, the size of the splinter materials, normal splinter material size. Pink is the one that I would use for padding. It's very soft, it's not very dense, but it will help to distribute the pressure. Blue, I use more when I'm trying to actually put a little bit of pressure and spread it across the anatomical area that you've chosen. So this is double the density to this one. Then you've got very, very thin, fleecy papilla web, and it comes on a roll and it comes in larger pieces. And then you've got this one, which actually, if I took a walk over to the other side of the room, I can tell you exactly what it's called, which is, okay, I knew it was a hapla as well, so it's hapla fleecy foam. And actually that makes sense because the inside, you can see it's got an inside to it, they're all sticky back, but inside is actually a foam there.
Okay. Could you tell us what thicknesses of Polyflex there are and who supplies it, as we don't currently use it?
Okay, so Polyflex is a performance health material, as are all of these. It comes in 3 thicknesses, 1.6, so 1/16. It comes in the 2/24, and it comes in the 1/8. So all 3 thicknesses are available in Polyflex.
Lovely, thank you. Another one, could you remind us of the name of the article, please? We'd love to read it.
Oh, yeah, it's brilliant. So it was Emma Bamford et al., and it's in Hand Therapy, the British Association of Hand Therapists journal, and it was this year, 2024.
And we'll probably do, we've got a bit of time for a couple more. What material is it that you use to trace the pattern for the splints?
Okay, so whatever I have around, not paper, because I find paper really difficult. It doesn't, so the question, in case you didn't hear the question, was what do I use for making patterns? This is plinth roll, but I'll just as happily use paper towel as long as it's big enough. One of the nice things about this, it's normal plinth roll. And then I've just cut the pieces in half so that they were all ready.
Thank you. And we'll do one last one. I noticed that you use 1-inch straps. I learned to use 2-inch straps for increased comfort and increased surface area for swelling, etc. Have you had any feedback about using 1-inch?
So the question was, I was using 1-inch. But that's because I just ran out of space. In my cupboard, I have 2-inch, and I agree with you completely. And something like on a hand splint, I would always use 1-inch. It's plenty. If you go 2-inch with the amount of contour and change of direction you want, it will sit uncomfortably on the skin. But I would normally, for a very transverse splint here, strap, I would also use the 2-inch. However, you mentioned edema. If I was doing it over a very edematous area, I would use a cross strap, not transverse.
What we might have to do is, because we've still got a few more questions, is close up and then...
There are a few more questions, as always, not a problem at all. And so I'm just going to do what I usually do, is I'll have those emailed to me, and I will get a reply to all of you, so we know who has asked which question, and I will email you back as soon as I've received that information. But thank you so much for giving up your lunchtime and sharing it with us. I hope you've seen something that's even vaguely useful to you, and have a lovely rest of the week.